have a tornado on the ground right now.
Just like a train came through.
Living with the intense power and impact of our weather. This year, it seems Mother Nature raised the bar.
We're seeing winds as high as 130 miles an hour.
Street after street, destruction after destruction.
Catastrophic storms.
I never see something like this in my life.
Raging wildfires.
That's getting closer and closer to our house.
Historic flooding.
It's just heartbreaking.
And unrelenting drought.
The soil has no moisture.
Running as much as 2 feet below average on rainfall.
Climate is changing faster than was changing before.
All combining to create new concerns.
Climate change is a direct threat to national security. Mother Nature is not pulling any punches.
We are approaching a real emergency.
But communities are responding.
Let's go.
Fighting and innovating to reshape the future.
We're not changing the environment. We're just making it a little bit more efficient.
We have to shift how we use our resources.
The community said, do something. Do something big. Don't do nothing. Definitely don't do nothing.
Now, a special presentation forecasting our future.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Carol Clark.
And I'm Nigel Robertson. Our meteorologists and entire team here at WYFF News 4 have been working all year to give you a better understanding of the impact of our local weather.
Weather influences what we do and how we do it every day. That's why we launched Forecasting Our Future in January, an effort to dig deeper into trends and storms to help you prepare for whatever comes your way.
It's safe to say this year has been one of extremes. The span of June to September, our summer months, was the hottest 4-month period ever in the U.S.
The drought that's gripping the nation reached levels not seen since the U.S. Drought Monitor began more than 20 years ago. And severe drought was more widespread than ever before.
At the same time, a rare rainfall event triggered devastating flash flooding in Kentucky and Missouri. Experts calling it a 1 in 1,000 year occurrence. This hour, we'll show you new research, new efforts to reduce weather impact, and a look at the year's big weather stories.
Chief Meteorologist Cindy Fitzgibbon from WCVB in Boston gets us started.
You can see some rotation around the main tornado.
You can see behind me, this roof is crushed.
This looks like a graveyard for boats.
Destructive hurricanes and life-changing tornadoes.
There's the vortex right there. Look at that tree bending.
It picked up and tossed this RV. Relentless storms and bitter winter weather.
Blizzard conditions here in Wells, Maine.
The snow is falling, pelting you in the face.
Heat soaring to record highs.
The heat emergency in the city is getting extended.
Wildfires out of control.
All that smoke coming from active fire burning very close here.
And historic flooding scarring the landscape.
The pictures and videos of the devastation don't do justice.
Snapshots of extreme weather impacting all of us this year. One weather event will go down as the most damaging of 2022.
Winds now 150 miles an hour, down from the 155.
The early images out of Southwest Florida because of Hurricane Ian are hard to swallow.
Hurricane Ian striking Florida September 28th, a forceful Category 4 storm decimating the west coast near Fort Myers Beach and Naples.
I've lived here 20 years. I've been there. This is my 5th hurricane. This is the worst one I've ever been through.
Yeah, me too.
Unbelievable.
Storm surge ripped out roads and bridges, cutting off coastal islands.
I guess this area hasn't had any help.
In central Florida, Ian dumped in excess of 20 inches of rain in just a matter of hours.
The relentless rain pushed the St. Johns River into these homes.
And this 5th strongest hurricane to ever make a landfall in the U.S. is carving a new Florida coastline.
We just want to take you down to the surface. Look at this house. Lost his porch, seawall wiped out. This is going to be a massive recovery effort here.
Wait. I see a tornado. There it is. This looks like it's at Araby.
Araby, Louisiana, March 22nd. WDSU is on the air. Their cameras capture the start of a record EF3 tornado.
Tornado on the ground, moving northeast.
The near 160-mile-per-hour winds tear up an 11-mile path in just 17 minutes.
The damage out here in Araby, it is incredible and massive. You can see a car flipped on its side.
It's more than I can talk about without really
just becoming hysterical.
This tornado, the strongest ever for the New Orleans area.
This is going to hit Seminole pretty much head on. Oh my gosh, look at that, guys.
One tornado after another struck Seminole County, Oklahoma in a single day during the peak of tornado season in May.
This is a bad situation for Seminole.
Oklahoma's tornado season slightly below average this year, but over time, the tornado trend is changing. Longer stretches of quiet weather, but the active days are more active than ever.
A large tornado on the ground.
A March 5th EF4 tornado in Iowa was the strongest ever recorded so far north so early in the year. And in Springdale, Arkansas, a direct hit.
This whole row of houses behind me was severely damaged.
There's a chair right there that held the tree up, and that's what saved my life.
And this was the strongest tornado of the year, April 5th in Bryan County, Georgia.
As you can see behind me, trees are snapped in half, windows broken.
An unusual EF4 tornado with winds estimated at 185 miles an hour.
There used to be a cabin. There was another house just beyond here that was carried away.
Flash flooding just as powerful as any tornado or hurricane. Take a look at the catastrophic damage in eastern Kentucky in late July.
The house, it just picked up and just turned sideways and just floated into the trees and just demolished.
6 to 10 inches of rain. You say to yourself, that's a lot of rainfall, and it is a lot of rain. But this came over a short period of time.
Upwards of 16 inches of rain over 5 days, something the National Weather Service calls historically unheard of. And in Jackson, Mississippi, the rising water wasn't as rapid, but it was just as damaging.
The Pearl River predicted to crest less than an hour at 35.5 feet, flooding streets and endangering hundreds of homes.
Intense August rain pushed a major reservoir near its limit, so overflow was sent into the Pearl River, which then spilled into neighborhoods.
A lot of flooding, all the way almost over mailboxes.
We got everybody out, and that's the most important thing.
The flooding exposed the nation to years of trouble with Jackson's neglected, malfunctioning water plant. The influx of water putting it entirely offline for weeks and igniting a crisis as 150,000 residents struggled to get drinking water. And in the Northeast, a relatively slow start to winter accelerated by the end of January.
We're seeing whiteout conditions and those winds over 50 miles per hour at times.
It is treacherous out here right now.
A stinging blizzard delivered massive surge along the New England coast.
We're measuring about 1.5 feet of snow at this point.
And dumped near record piles of snow across the region. Even South Carolina was stuck with some unusual snowfall. This January storm broke a nearly 60-year record in the Greenville area, piling up more than 1/2 foot in a single day. Eventually, winter cold gave way to summer heat, the country's third warmest summer on record.
Today was the 7th straight day of 90-degree weather.
It's been like desert hot.
Heat waves all across the country, sometimes in the triple digits. Sacramento, California spent 44 days at 100 or above, with a record-setting 116-degree day in September.
These are live pictures as the big tanker dropping retardant right on the ridge of that canyon.
Heat and extreme dryness adding to the intensity of wildfires. California's mosquito fire raged for 50 days, scorching nearly 80,000 acres of land and cherished property.
You might be able to hear the booming noises. It sounds like propane tanks going off.
The sheriff came and picked us up, and he had to drive through fire to get us out.
Experts say shifting climate and weather patterns are expanding the length of the active fire season.
Where are we going to live? You know, it's very scary.
California had just about 7,500 wildfires this year. That's a little less than average. Officials say billions of dollars spent recently on forest management may have helped keep that number lower.
Between wildfires and other damaging weather in 2022, government agencies estimate disaster costs could exceed $100 billion.
One weather event this year touched every corner of the U.S.
When it's this dry, it's hard to produce anything. I'm not really sure what we can do, because if we have more of this, it's going to be a real problem.
From farm fields to drinking water and the shipping economy, the ways a massive drought is affecting our lives.
Plus, how weather can help or hinder the quality of fruits and veggies we get in the spring and summer. It's more complicated than you might think.
When you think winter, you think snow and ice, but another kind of dangerous winter weather is the reason you should never let your guard down. Welcome back. Winter brings a whole new set of obstacles for farmers.
Chief Meteorologist Chris Justice joins us now. And Chris, let's talk about plunging temperatures and how that could affect the quality of produce we get in the spring.
Yeah, something we really have to look out for. Now, a commonly held belief among local farmers is that a very cold winter can help the growing season in some ways. Meteorologist Griffin Hardy talked to an upstate expert to find out how the temperatures impact farming.
Peaches, apples, and strawberries. Three things this region is known for across the country. But one problem farmers often face with growing fruit is pests like bugs and fungi. During winter, it's a common idea that freezing temperatures can kill off those pests before spring planting. So I went to the experts to see how true this idea is. One professor told me these pests often have their own way of tolerating extreme cold.
They overwinter. They have these forms called spores in case of fungi, for example. And so they are very tolerant to very cold temperatures. And so they're able to withstand the winter without affecting the future population.
Dr. Melgar said the weather can affect how fruit pests spread, but more often than not, it's when conditions help the fungi spread rather than prevent it.
And so if you have a combination of warm weather with rainy weather, wet and humid, humid conditions, when they are combined with warm weather, that's their ideal. That's when they thrive. That's their ideal temperatures and conditions.
Aside from the pests themselves, Dr. Melgar went on to say that prolonged cold periods in winter are actually good for the fruit tree's health long term.
I mean, unless we go to, minus 15 or like below the minus 10 Fahrenheit, at those temperatures we would have tree damage. But other than that, I mean, any temperatures like in the 40s, 30s, and those are great now for accumulating proper chill and blooming later in spring as they are supposed to bloom.
So whether or not this year we see a cold winter or an extremely cold winter, the more important thing to look towards for growing season next spring is how rainy and how humid will be this winter instead of the temperatures. That's something we'll absolutely keep our eyes on in our forecasts. For now, for WYFF News 4, I'm meteorologist Griffin Hardy.
Great info, Griffin. Now, when we think of wintry weather, snow and ice come to mind. But as Perella Lewis shows us, another natural disaster can happen no matter the season.
Whether it's melting snow and ice or just old-fashioned heavy rain, winter flooding can bring hazardous conditions during the colder months. And this is a reminder to always be prepared.
Flooding is the most common and second most deadly natural disaster in the U.S. And it can happen any time of year.
We do run water rescues in the winter as well as the spring and the summer. So seasonal doesn't really make a difference. When the water's up, we usually have to go out.
Hunter Perry is an instructor and member of a swiftwater rescue team who says that South Carolina alone sends out about 100 rescue calls a year due to rapidly rising water.
When it does rain, the low areas do rise and cover roads. And there are people who get in the water when it starts moving faster.
Because it only takes 6 inches of rapidly moving water to knock a person off their feet and just 2 feet of water to sweep a vehicle away, people are often caught off guard.
So the tip for that is if you can't see the lines on the road, the yellow lines and the white lines, then you need to find another way around.
It's advice that is as basic as it is crucial. So as temperatures drop, just remember that river levels can still rise and streets flood any time of year.
Water is relentless. And it wins most of the time.
Perella Lewis, WYFF News 4.
Extreme weather now considered a threat to our national security.
Mother Nature has done more direct damage to U.S. bases than any foreign enemy in recent years.
Hear about the climate trouble facing our military right here at home and how the government is responding.
And later,
we're revealing the most innovative climate projects in America, including the green jobs available now. The National Investigative Unit's Forecasting Our Future investigation continues, coming up.
And you can watch some of our Forecasting Our Future and weather coverage on our very local streaming app. Get updated weather information anytime and our latest local newscast as well.
Very Local is free to download and available for Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and mobile devices. You'll also find our original programming, including shows for food lovers, true crime, and much more. When you think about threats to our national security, the weather is probably not top of mind. But the Department of Defense says the changing climate is one of the greatest security threats right now. Dozens of military bases are impacted by flooding, wildfires, drought, intense heat, and more. Washington Bureau correspondent Christopher Salas tells us how it's forcing the military to make major changes.
It's the largest naval base in the world.
All of our aircraft carriers on the East Coast are based here at Naval Station Norfolk.
The center of America's defense is at sea.
Flooding here at Norfolk is fairly frequent,
making water the most immediate challenge to this naval base.
Exacerbating the sea level rise impacts is something called land subsidence. The land is actually sinking while the seas are rising.
It's disrupting daily operations.
Sometimes folks can't get to work because the flooding gets so bad.
And if a big enough storm strikes,
it can shut down operations for weeks.
Like in 2003, when Hurricane Isabel caused billions of dollars worth of damage at Naval Station Norfolk and the surrounding areas. More recently, in 2018, separate hurricanes ripped through Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida and Camp Lejeune in North Carolina.
Mother Nature has done more direct damage to U.S. bases than any foreign enemy in recent years.
John Conger is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Energy Installations and the Environment.
Climate change is a direct threat to national security.
That threat, detailed in a 2019 Department of Defense report. 53 installations across the country are facing recurrent flooding, and as sea levels continue to rise, there's potential to add 60 more to that list.
Anything that affects that national defense mission becomes a priority, and they have to pay attention.
Which is why the DoD issued guidance last year, advising all branches of government to create action plans to prevent climate change's impact. In Norfolk, they know what they're up against.
They have been precisely measuring just how much sea levels have risen here at the naval base in Virginia with this water gauge that was installed in 1927. Since then, water levels have risen 18 inches and they could rise another 3 feet, according to some estimations.
And it's why it's no longer just about prevention.
We're working to do is see if we can mitigate the damage to the greatest extent possible.
The base is building seawalls, climate resilient infrastructure, and relocating utilities to adapt to more frequent flooding.
A lot of the times we find that the gear is very low or underground for the electrical infrastructure, so we are making an effort to raise it up, elevate it.
Those like Congress say the success of the plans at Norfolk and other naval bases will impact the entire nation.
Mother Nature is not pulling any punches, and we have to get ready for that.
And the Department of Defense is hoping to have a bulk of the projects done by 2030, calling it a decisive decade for climate action. In Norfolk, I'm Christopher Salas.
And the military isn't alone. Cities and towns all across the U.S. are taking action to protect themselves from severe weather. In particular, the surge of water that comes with powerful storms. Chief National Investigative Correspondent Mark Albert shows us some of those creative solutions.
It's loud, yes.
This is the sound a community makes clawing itself out of climate-fueled danger.
Those teeth are grinding away at the sediment.
On the Yahara River in Madison, Wisconsin, 2 dredges, 1 hydraulic and 1 mechanical, are scooping out the bottom of the river, essentially so it can hold more water. Is this needed?
This is absolutely needed with the big storms that we've been seeing.
Big storms that are stronger and that keep threatening more and more homes.
In 2018, it was 3 feet higher than it is today.
So 3 feet's right about here?
That's correct.
So our knees would be underwater?
Correct, yes. Knees would be underwater.
So Madison needs more room. The city includes 4 lakes with connecting rivers. Those rivers act as pipes leading to the lakes, and they get clogged with more dirt and debris and water when it storms, leading the water to spill over the banks and back up the storm sewers, flooding parts of the community.
We thought we had more time.
But Dane County Executive Joe Parisi is out of time to protect residents.
The county basically bought all of this equipment. Is that because you believe the problem is here to stay?
Yeah, I mean, climate change is real. The impacts are happening now.
Happening now across the country, as counties and cities told the National Investigative Unit in an exclusive survey we sent to 4,000 communities earlier this year. Strong storms and more flooding from Oakland, California and Fayette County, Pennsylvania to Baldwin County, Georgia and Boston, Massachusetts, and to Hoboken, New Jersey.
We build resiliency parks to defend against rainfall flooding.
Jennifer Gonzalez, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Hoboken, gave us a tour of their soon-to-be largest resiliency park to date. Resilient because a majority of the services will be permeable, so water doesn't run off into the community, but instead collects in this million-gallon underground tank.
That will prevent that area from flooding, hopefully.
Saving homes, saving property, saving lives.
Absolutely.
The city, like so many others along the East Coast, is still traumatized from Superstorm Sandy in 2012, a ferocious pounding that caused a total $70 billion in damage, $125 million of that here in Hoboken.
The community said, do something big, don't do nothing, definitely don't do nothing.
Now 2 resiliency parks are open, with a 3rd under construction and more planned. Ravi Bala is Hoboken's mayor.
If it's successful, once it's built, it's intended to really break that cycle and create a resilient city that can withstand the effects of climate change through the generations.
A lasting legacy, perhaps, of taming the surge, now threatening America's communities coast to coast. On the Yahara River in southern Wisconsin, I'm Chief National Investigative Correspondent Mark Albert.
At that project in Wisconsin, the latest phase of dredging is expected to remove more than 4,000 dump truck loads of sediment from the river.
It's boom or bust when it comes to rain and drought.
We don't make it rain, we just tend to make it rain more. We're capturing more water for the benefit of the community.
See the innovative projects to combat worsening dry conditions across the country.
Watching wildlife may give us a good indication of just where we stand with lasting weather and climate impacts. The changes already documented from coast to coast.
I'm not going to be charged for power during the day if there's enough sun and it's coming in.
That's correct.
And Jeff Roslin has the costs and benefits of going solar. One of the biggest, widest-reaching weather stories this year is the lingering drought.
By far, the Southwest felt the most extreme drought effects, but it has touched every state directly or indirectly as conditions intensified. Right now, more than 50% of the country is still experiencing some level of drought.
Meteorologist Joe Diaz takes us on a tour of the drought impact across America.
The soil has no moisture at all.
It's dramatic, there's no question. The commentary is universal. Nobody's ever seen it as bad as it is right now.
It's the grim reality in communities all across the country. The ground dried up and cracked, farm fields filled with shriveled dead crops, and rivers and reservoirs drained of their critical resource.
And where I'm standing is typically covered with water this time of year, but the drought and demand is depleting the water supply.
Farmers tell me they've seen just a fraction of the amount of rain they normally do.
2 to 3 more weeks of this could have drastic effects on the economy.
The million-dollar question, when will this drought end?
This year's drought has been one of the worst on record for much of the country. In October, nearly 82% of the U.S. was experiencing some level of drought. In many states, it's the latest chapter in what's been a lengthy span of damaging dryness. New Mexico is one of the southwestern states trapped in a decades-long mega drought. something not seen since at least the 1500s.
This dry cycle started around the year 2000, and you'd often think by now we'd be seeing the beginnings of a wet cycle. However, we are more than 20 years into this historic mega drought, and there's nothing to suggest changes anytime soon.
The intense drought is even sucking the life out of the massive Rio Grande, a primary water supply for New Mexico and other states. Lower river levels mean less water available to those areas that desperately need more. 900 miles to the northeast,
parts of central Iowa are running as much as 2 feet below average on rainfall.
The land where the tall corn grows can't stand up to that nickname in these unusual drought conditions.
Climate change is shifting precipitation events to this boom or bust scenario. A lot of precip or no precip for prolonged time periods.
1 minute, the corn and soybean fields are bone dry. The next, intense sporadic rain makes it impossible to plant or harvest. That boom or bust scenario is strikingly visible in the Platte River, which supplies 70% of Iowa's drinking water. And miles away, there's another problem for these farmers on the mighty Mississippi River, the waterway they typically use to move crop exports.
As you can see, we're 40 or 50 feet beneath what our normal river levels here at the office are.
That means barge travel is restricted to single file, carrying lighter loads to avoid running aground.
You can't get as much freight per barge as you normally do. It's happening at a really inopportune time, and that's called harvest season.
The ongoing drought in California has forced farmers to make some very difficult decisions this year.
California is considered the hot spot for prolonged and severe drought. At several points this year, the entire state was experiencing the highest categories of drought, forcing widespread water restrictions. Farmers who grow everything from vegetables to wheat have no choice but to produce less or cut out some crops entirely.
We have always have to fight for our food. What's different now is because the climate is changing faster than was changing before.
We strive to make money by producing things, and when it's this dry, it's hard to produce anything.
The crucial food supply we normally see coming from these Nebraska cornfields is now half of what it used to be. In Saunders and Dodge counties, they've only seen a third of the more than 30 inches of rain typical for the growing season.
I've got places out in my field that just burned right to the ground.
It's not only our food supply that's a problem. With rangeland drying up and grain costs soaring, some farms can't feed all the cattle. The only choice is to sell the herd.
It affects the feed cost so much that it's cheaper to move the cattle than it is to move the feed.
In New England, looks are deceiving. Don't be fooled by what appears to be green, thriving fields and healthy trees. The entire area is suffering moderate to severe drought.
We need some rain. We need like 3 or 4 inches of rain.
Rain that might help replenish the dried up well that needs to pump 10,000 gallons of water every day to keep these Maine cows hydrated.
We are approaching a real emergency.
And more regular rainfall is needed further south in Massachusetts, which is experiencing some of the most severe drought conditions in the region. Massive drinking water reservoirs are at critical levels. The Cape Cod bogs that deliver cranberries are just puddles.
The marsh itself is just completely drying out.
And 1 in every 10 Christmas trees at this tree farm have already died.
There's a big one here that just didn't make it at all. We just have to live with it. We can't fight Mother Nature. It is what it is.
But the fight is on to overcome, even outsmart Mother Nature and the erratic weather and climate.
I had to get a place like this where I can control the weather. All right, well, as crazy as that would sound, I can control the weather in here.
Fran Busa brought the growing season inside, investing in a hydroponic greenhouse to help his produce survive. This drought-fighting tool seems like science fiction.
We don't make it rain, we just tend to make it rain more. We're capturing more water for the benefit of the community.
California is one of at least 8 states now seeding clouds, using flare trees and other methods to prime the sky and deliver rain that wouldn't have fallen.
10 and 20% increase in precipitation. We're not changing the environment, we're just making it a little bit more efficient.
And back in New Mexico, they're changing bad water into good This is the Groundwater National Desalinization Research Facility, where brackish groundwater is stripped of its salt and transformed into drinkable water for people and agriculture.
If you have this much of water that's fresh groundwater, and then you can supplement with desalination water, then you can somewhat mitigate the changes that are happening with seasons and climate change.
Changes happening in real time, presenting challenges we hope we can overcome.
We're farmers. That's all we have is hope.
For Forecasting Our Future, I'm meteorologist Joe Diaz.
Estimates of this year's damage and economic losses from drought vary from $10 to $30 billion.
And there is some promising news. The past few weeks, many areas received rainfall that will at least temporarily improve drought conditions.
From drought to snow, Chief Meteorologist Chris Justice joins us again with his winter weather outlook. Chris.
Hi, yeah, exciting time here. One of my favorite times of the year to kind of outlook what you can expect. But before we can look ahead, we need to look back at this winter. Who can forget this? This was our memorable January snowstorm. Meteorologist Sydney Sullivan shows us more.
It was a snowstorm for the ages. Moving in overnight, the blanket of snow was quite the sight to wake up to.
How exciting was it to open up the blinds and see snow?
Really exciting. Making it the largest snowstorm in the upstate in almost a decade. 6.5 inches of snow in the upstate and nearly 11 inches across western North Carolina. And some had to see it to believe it, driving into Greenville just to see the flakes firsthand.
There's no way we're probably going to see this weather in Charleston anytime soon.
There's going to be a lot of ice on those roads.
And it took quite some time for the upstate to completely thaw, closing some schools for the entire week.
We're going to go sledding. I'm excited for that. And we're going to build a snowman.
With the exception of 2011 and 2012, it has snowed every single winter in the upstate. So the chances of seeing at least some snow this winter look promising.
Thank you for that, Sydney. Very good perspective there on what was one of the biggest snows we had in a while. Let's take a look at the outlook here. I can tell you as we get closer to Christmas now, we're looking at a serious chill. And by serious, I mean single-digit temperatures possible in the high elevations of the mountains. Teens in the upstate. We need to watch late week as we get close to Christmas, a serious chill coming our way. And on top of that, wind chill values. And this is not only for the Carolinas and Georgia, but for all of the East Coast for your travels there. Let's take a closer look at the setup that kind of brings in situations like that. When you get blocking patterns with big high pressures up toward the north, it just kinks the jet stream down and allows for some serious cold blasts. This is what I expect this winter. We will get short-lived, intense cold blasts. I don't expect it to be cold the entire winter, but there will be those short-lived but very intense, potent cold blasts. Now, I want to show you the patterns compared. You hear us talk often in winter forecasting about the different phases, El Nino, La Nina, or neutral. We are entering a La Nina season, which usually brings about half of what an El Nino year does to our area. Let me show you how a La Nina system sets up. It starts with cooler water temperatures in the Pacific, and basically it means a muted jet stream for the south. You just can't get a lot to go on. So it typically, and I mean typically, leads to overall dry and warm weather across the southeast. When you look specifically at La Nina years, I did the digging, looked at every single one over the last 21 years, and out of all of those, only 3 of those seasons brought us above average snowfall, including last year where we got the one 6.5-inch snow in January. So if you get that rain and moisture to fall right in the middle of one of those intense cold blasts, you can still get big snow. But as you see here, overall, you don't typically get that. So my outlook for winter, long periods of warm and dry spells, but a short, intense cold blast here and there. We're experiencing that. It's cold now, but about to get even colder closer to Christmas. Snow chances will be found in those changes, which is why we have to watch late week very closely. Frequent cold and snow blasts are not likely this winter, and that includes Greenville and Spartanburg, surrounding areas where you typically get 2 to 3 inches of snow, or 5.9 inches of snow, I should say. We'll get a little bit lower than that if this pans out. 2 to 3 would be the case looking throughout winter time.
Thank you, Chris. There is work underway to help get a handle on all of these changes from severe weather and the shifting climate.
Still ahead, the big and small ideas leading the way in local communities.
If you drive around your neighborhood, you will surely see homes with solar panels on the roof or even in the backyard. Energy from the sun can take stress off the power grid and the environment.
The Inflation Reduction Act is giving homeowners a 30% tax credit on new solar installations for the next decade. But what does solar really cost you, and is that outweighed by any benefit?
We asked Chief National Consumer Correspondent Jeff Rosen to get some answers.
This is timely with record-breaking heat and power grids strained to the max. This is where solar shines. It helps the environment, easing strain on the grid. But you also want to know how it affects you financially. We're crunching the numbers.
All right, we're at a house right now where they're actually in the middle of an install for solar, and we're going to walk you through this as it happens. How much does it cost to put all this stuff up, and how much money can you save? This is Jensen Chapman from SunPower.
How you doing?
Am I off the power grid entirely when I put solar up?
Well, not necessarily. All solar electric systems are tied into the electrical grid. So think of it this way. When you have solar on the roof, that becomes your first source of electricity for the home. Now, during cloudy days or stormy weather, that's when you can rely on the grid, or say at night.
So you're still on the power grid if you need the power, if it's cloudy or something, but that's a last resort, right?
Correct.
I'm not going to be charged for power during the day if there's enough sun and it's coming in.
That's correct.
All right, let's get down to the cost. The average size home is about 2,300 square feet, and the cost of getting solar panels installed can average about $20,000. But you can cut that down with federal, state, and local tax credits. In this case, just the federal incentive alone of 30% off will get you $6,000 off, bringing that $20,000 average down to $14,000.
Can you, with the installation costs, is there like a payment plan, or do you have to pay that all up front?
Absolutely. For zero down, again, you can finance the cost of your system, and that monthly payment is going to compete with your electric bill. Sometimes a little more, sometimes the same, and sometimes a little less.
So you don't have to pay out 20 grand off the top to install the panels.
Correct.
So how much can you save on your monthly electric bill? You start saving from day one. Solar can cut your monthly energy bill by, get this, up to 50% off. But wait until you hear this next part.
We talked about the cloudy days or nighttime when you're not getting enough, but there are also times when you have too much. So what happens with that surplus?
When you have solar on the roof and you're producing more energy than what the home is using, that energy can either go back to the grid to get credits for it, or you can...
Wait, hold on a minute. You'll get like a credit on your bill for the next time you need to pay the electric company.
That's correct.
So you're basically selling it back to them.
That's correct. Or you could store that extra solar power in your own solar battery that can be used on demand, say at night or during grid outages.
That's right. No need to go out and buy a clunky generator for power outages. Your solar storage is your generator. Here's the big thing. The cost and how useful it is varies from house to house. Google has a website called Project Sunroof. You just type in your address. It uses Google Earth imagery to analyze your own roof and local weather patterns. It will even calculate your average electric bill and how much money you in particular can save if you go solar. I'm going to put a link to that website on my website at RossenReports.com. It's a great tool.
Solar energy, wind power, electric vehicles, they're all green industries, and they're growing.
Chief National Investigative Correspondent Mark Albert shows us some of the unique climate careers already building resumes.
We're tearing down the house. We're going to reuse the materials that we can.
Jake Wiley is deconstructing a house a half-hour north of Minneapolis.
Can you hook me up?
And building himself
Heads up.
back up. His long adult court record begins at 18. Theft, fleeing police, and drug possession. Now at 29, it's time for a renovation. He got out of prison March 1st.
This program is helping save my life.
Wiley works for Better Futures Minnesota, a nonprofit group that gives green jobs to those who used to wear that color and other dark hues in prison.
Heads up.
1,400 felons so far.
And we want as little waste as possible.
PJ Hubbard is a vice president at Better Futures.
It sounds like it's not just about climate resiliency, it's about personal resiliency.
Correct.
Along with the lives salvaged, up to 85% of each home resold to the public for reuse. The county here, Hennepin, provides $200,000 a year to nurture the program.
It's both that social and environmental mission, which is really, I think, the best of both worlds for this project.
Now, some communities are starting even sooner.
We make the change, we got the solutions. We know.
On the first Saturday in May, the island of Kauai in Hawaii held a youth climate summit. 1 in 4 island residents is under 25 years old, the green workforce of the future. Nearby, the Big Island of Hawaii has launched a training school to build a renewable energy workforce. Other states are increasing education as well.
I've only had 2 weeks of climate education.
Kosi FG just graduated from Bangor High School in Maine. She helped lobby state lawmakers to create a $2 million grant program for more climate education in schools.
Obviously, climate change is one of the most important issues of our generation.
Melissa Lucci is building those lessons into her science classes at Kennebunk High School in York, Maine.
You are empowering youth to actually make a change and be an advocate for climate change education.
Wages for green jobs are rising, up more than 11% for entry-level jobs in just 3 years, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Nearly 900,000 Americans now work in green jobs, with these states leading the way, says Promo Leaf, a company that provides businesses sustainable promotional products. Jake Wiley, now deconstructing homes outside Minneapolis and laying his own foundation for a stable life, makes $17.50 per hour as a supervisor. His first green job.
Heads up.
The first, perhaps, in a budding climate career.
It helps the planet, it teaches me a lot.
In Dayton, Minnesota, I'm Chief National Investigative Correspondent Mark Albert.
This year, our National Investigative Unit asked every county in America and major cities what they're doing to combat a changing climate.
Growing green careers was one thing we heard, along with new government programs focused on weather. You can find the full results in the questionnaire in the Forecasting Our Future section of our mobile app.
So we have to shift how we use our resources. So this whole recirculating system, we use upwards of 95% less water.
Coming up, the new age of farming, how some are growing more, using less land and fewer resources no matter the weather.
And the simple solution that's helping keep marinas and waterfronts pollution-free. People and organizations across the country are in search of solutions to reduce the impact of extreme weather and slow the changes we're seeing with our climate.
Meteorologist Tyler Jankowski from WPTZ shows us some of the creative approaches being taken right now.
There's no other place this group would rather be. Enjoying a beautiful day on the lake in Missouri, casting a line in the water.
Just getting that first thump and that first bite and said, this is something I want to feel all the time.
Fishing is life for Brian Sowers, an organizer of the Crappie Masters All-American Trail Fishing Tournament. He says we all have a responsibility in keeping waterways and the environment clean and healthy.
That carbon footprint is something we are very, we talk about that all the time.
To help, Sowers is among the people pushing anglers to use E10 fuel in their boat motors, a blend of gas that uses a higher percentage of ethanol than typical blends and runs cleaner.
What that does, it lowers emissions, cleaner air, cleaner water. Simple as that, and better fishery.
Helping cows run cleaner can reduce global greenhouse gas levels too.
About 50% of the carbon that we produce on our farm is actually come from the gases that the cows produce.
Every burp from a cow and every pile of manure emits methane. These 500 cows at Sunset Lake Farm in Vermont, who help produce your Ben & Jerry's ice cream, are now on the leading edge of helping our environment.
We're going to be doing a feed trial with feeding the cows seaweed.
The new high-quality diet cuts down on gas, and what's still released from the manure will be converted into natural gas.
You can take methane from digested, cow manure and clean it up and put it into our pipeline system.
And that's not the only part of farming that's changing. At Springworks Farm in Maine, growing season is now year-round thanks to aquaponics.
Aquaponics in its simplest form is the combination and symbiotic relationship between plants and fish.
The plants in this case, lettuce, grown in beds floating on water, and the fish are providing nutrients.
These are our tilapia. In our system, what we have is we have fish, and they're doing their thing, and their waste goes into a filtration system that ultimately gets pumped into these growing beds we see today. We grow a head of lettuce in like 35, 40 days, which is not typical. You know, in field farming, you're lucky if you're getting a nice head of lettuce in 55 days.
SpringWorks grows 1 million heads of lettuce annually in greenhouses taking up less than an acre of land.
We have to shift how we use our resources. What we can create for the future is using smaller amounts of land with systems like this that can create a lot more productivity.
An invention in Ohio is helping keep marinas clean.
Behind me, you are seeing the plastics piranha.
The Clean Earth rover, the size of a pool float, collects plastic and trash while monitoring bacteria and pollution levels at the tap of a button.
Log into your phone, go to the app, identify in your marina where it is. It has a LiDAR unit on it so it won't crash into things. It's got an 8-hour battery. You got it.
On this beach, it's not battery power, but rather people power keeping things clean.
They can pick up a basket as they go for a walk. If they see any trash, they can pick it up, bring it back to our trash receptacles, and dispose of it. That way it keeps our beaches clean and clear.
Cleaning up trash or clearing pollutants from the air or water.
The boat's a good one.
We can all pitch in by simply being good stewards of the environment.
Leave a place better than you found it.
Forecasting our future, I'm meteorologist Tyler Jankowski.
Leave it better than you found it. Some good advice.
You can learn more about the programs and efforts we just showed you in the Forecasting Our Future section of our app and website. You could also watch some of the stories you saw here over the last hour.
And the full program will soon be available on demand through our Very Local streaming app. You'll find Very Local as well as our news and weather app right there in your app store. Our meteorologists and news team will continue to dig deeper into the weather impacting our lives, along with bringing you severe weather coverage as storms hit.
Thank you for joining us for Forecasting Our Future.